Good day. This is Dimitri Lascaris coming to you from Kalamata, Greece for Reason to Resist on May 19th, 2026. We're very pleased to be joined today for the first time by Carl Zha. Carl is a Sichuan-born political commentator, journalist, and podcast host, renowned for his insights into China's history, culture, and politics. Born in China shortly after Mao Zedong's death in 1976, Carl grew up between China and the United States before settling in Bali, Indonesia, where he currently resides, and he hosts the popular Silk and Steel podcast, which challenges Western narratives on China. Thank you so much for joining us today, Carl.
My pleasure, Dimitri.
So, Carl, I'd like to begin with the economic conditions in Indonesia, where you currently reside. Numerous states in South Asia are struggling to varying degrees to cope with constraints in the supply of oil and gas and other essential commodities due to the situation in the Strait of Hormuz. At the current time, how is Indonesia being affected?
It's not doing so great because one thing is the exchange rate. Now, $1 to Indonesian rupiah exchange rate is at all-time high. That means $1 now buys a lot more Indonesian rupiah. And Indonesia is a country that actually depends a lot on imports using dollars. Indonesia is actually a very resource-rich country. It has oil, it has gas, it has rubber, it has gold, you name it. But the problem Indonesia faces is like a lot of countries in the global south. It has the resources, but it lacks the capital to develop them. And for example, even though Indonesia has a lot of oil, but what Indonesia do is it exports the crude oil and imports refined petroleum products like gasoline, diesel, chemical fertilizers, because there's not enough refining capability in Indonesia. This is actually a situation that I find familiar to China in the 1980s, because I grew up in China in the 1980s. Back in 1980s, China was doing what Indonesia is doing today. It was exporting crude oil. A lot of people didn't know about this, but China is actually one of the world's largest oil producer. It produces more oil than Iran. I think it ranked number 5 in the world oil production. But back in 1980s, China was a net crude oil exporter. It was exporting crude oil to Japan, and it was importing gasoline, diesel, jet fuel, chemical fertilizers, because it did not have the refining capabilities. And this is the situation Indonesia finds it today. So it export crude oil cheaply. Well, now the crude oil price gone up, but the gas, diesel, jet fuel price gone up even more. And now you have to import those back. And also it's imports 90%, 94% is soybean, mostly from the United States, which require dollars. So when the dollar goes up in value versus Indonesian rupiah, this is pretty bad for Indonesian economy. And so, and this part, a major contributing factor is what's going on in the Strait of Hormuz right now.
And so have you seen a drastic increase in the cost of living in Indonesia since the war began in Iran?
There hasn't been. Okay, so the government does subsidize the petrol. So there has been in price increases, but because the government subsidies, it's somewhat buffeted. But everything else price has gone up. From food, basic. Just basic groceries. Yeah, there's definitely an inflation going on.
So the Strait of Malacca is a narrow stretch of water, 900 kilometers long, and from 65 to 250 kilometers wide, I understand, between the Malay Peninsula to the northeast and the Indonesian island of Sumatra to the southwest. And it connects the Andaman Sea in the Indian Ocean and the South China Sea. And as the main shipping channel between the Indian Pacific Oceans, it is one of the most important shipping lanes in the world. And there have been suggestions that if Iran succeeds in imposing a toll on ships passing through the Strait of Hormuz, then Indonesia will follow suit and impose a toll on ships passing through the Strait of Malacca. Do you believe that's a serious possibility? Is this something that's being discussed at a high level within the Indonesian political elite?
This was proposed by the Indonesian finance minister, but they very quickly walked back for obvious reasons, because this is there are a lot of powers in this world that would not want to see that happen. First of all, so I don't think realistically it will happen, because first of all, United States would not want to see that happen, and U.S. is invested heavily on potentially controlling the Strait of Malacca, because U.S. Navy has for decades been, through think tank papers or their own war games, claim that they want to invest in choking off the Strait of Malacca as a potential choking point against Chinese energy supply, because as many people know, most of the Chinese oil gas imports from either Middle East or Africa have to go through the Strait of Malacca into South China Sea, and the idea that individual countries start to assert their sovereignty following the example of Iran. This is not something that the United States would want to see. So at the current time, I don't see Indonesia will go openly challenge the established norm yet.
So let's then focus on the Strait of Hormuz. During Trump's recent visit to China, it was widely reported that senior Chinese officials agreed with the Trump regime that Iran should not be permitted to impose tolls on ships passing through the Strait of Hormuz. Do you understand that to be, in fact, China's official position? And if so, how do you think that is affecting or will affect relations with Iran? Because after all, the Iranian government seems quite determined to retain control of the Strait of Hormuz and to impose tolls on ships that pass through it.
That's correct. First of all, this is what we got from this is a reporting on what the Trump administration said. They have agreed with the Chinese. I rather wait for the Chinese official readout to come out, and so because the Trump administration at this point have zero credibility, and what I can see is that China would like to return to the pre-war conditions into the Strait of Hormuz, because, as I mentioned, China do derive a lot of its energy import from the Persian Gulf region. China is about 86% energy self-sufficient, but it imports the rest, which is about 14% of its energy. And out of the 14% of the energy China does import, half of that is oil, and again, another 50% of that oil come from the Persian Gulf. So China has a big interest to see the traffic through the Persian Strait of Hormuz return to the pre-war level. So again, I think I can see they will just agree with United States in principle. It's something that they can throw the Trump administration a bone, but I don't see China lifting any fingers to help United States to implement that. I mean, how right now, U.S. has no way of opening the Strait of Hormuz. That's why they're trying to seek help from even China. But I don't see China is going to step in and somehow pressure Iran to give up on their control of the Strait of Hormuz. I mean, China can issue a statement of what they want to see happen, but would they help United States to achieve its aim in the Strait of Hormuz? No, obviously not.
At the same time, there's certainly, it's quite clear that China and Iran attach considerable importance to their relations, but it's also true that China has important economic relations with other Persian Gulf states. Most notably, it is, I believe, the largest importer of Saudi crude. And presumably, this puts China in a delicate position in the current circumstances, because Saudi is clearly aligned with the United States and has allowed its airspace and military bases in Saudi territory to be used to facilitate illegal U.S. attacks on Iran. So could you talk to us about the nature of the relationship between Iran and China and how, in your view, China is balancing these competing interests? And in particular,
Yeah.
do you think China views its relations with Iran as being more important to its national interest than its relations with other Gulf states?
Yeah, that's a good question because China does have a traditionally friendly relationship with Iran. I mean, stretch all the way to the 70s, and but China, at the same time, as you mentioned, it has interest in the rest of the Gulf states. China has a lot. If you look at the China's oil imports, the number one origin country of Chinese imported oil is Russia, of course, but number two is Saudi Arabia, and Iran would be a distant third, because what we have for the data from 2024 and 2025, it says the top three countries that China imports oil from is Russia, Saudi Arabia, and Malaysia. But Malaysia is an oil producing country, but it doesn't produce oil in that kind of quantity. So what really happened is a lot of Iranian oil and Venezuelan oil, they're being carried by so-called the shadow fleet that travels through the Strait of Malacca into South China Sea, where those oil gets offloaded to different tankers, and they get relabeled as Malaysian oil to export to China. And we know that figure, for 2024, China imported 13% of its oil from Malaysia. In 2025, a little bit less, about 11% of the oil from Malaysia. Most of that is actually probably Iranian oil. So China obviously have to place a balancing act because it imports a lot of oil from Saudi Arabia. It imports a lot of natural gas from Qatar. It has a lot of investment. Majority of Chinese investment directly toward West Asia is actually in UAE. And UAE is right now like completely getting bombarded by Iranian drones and missiles. So China always has to play a balancing act. I mean, one reason China was able to broker the Saudi Iran peace deal several years earlier is because China maintained a friendly relationship with both Iran and Saudi Arabia. But at the same time, China also understands that the reason if Iran fails, if the regime change goal of United States gets achieved in Iran, then that would allow United States to marshal its resources to concentrate on China. This is why China would not like to see Iran fail. Same way China would not like to see Russia fail in Ukraine. This is why China has been throwing a lifeline to Russia as well as Iran. China purchased 90% of the Iranian oil exports. Now, at the same time, what China would like to do is like to go back to the pre-war situation where it can freely import its oil from the Gulf. So before the war, the Gulf region exports about 20 million barrels of oil per day. And now there's only about 4.5 million barrels are getting out through the Saudi pipeline that goes to the Red Sea. And so there's this, and the Qatar gas only up to very recently, there wasn't any Qatar gas coming out. It's just I think last week there was a couple Qatar LNG tankers start to sell toward Pakistan, and I think that was allowed by Iran because Iran's own relationship with Pakistan, and so obviously China would like to see the blockade lifted at some point, as soon as possible, actually. So by stating that in principle, I mean, it's that is what China wants, but it doesn't mean China is necessarily on the U.S. side. That it wants to see the Strait of Hormuz situation resolved, but not necessarily resolved in U.S.'s favor. So there are two different things. This is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. You mentioned that if Iran fell, the U.S. could marshal its resources, focus on China. That's unquestionably true. But I would also suggest that, and I'm curious to have your reaction to this, It's also the fact that if Iran were to fall, effectively the United States, directly or indirectly, would control the resources of West Asia. There would be no meaningful opposition to U.S. hegemony. It would also effectively control the key trade routes in West Asia. And so I've had this debate with people like John Helmer in my program, who has suggested that the Chinese government is effectively playing a double game and is stabbing the Iranian government in the back. This is something that I'm not convinced of this at all. What I think is that China has a powerful incentive to ensure that Iran doesn't fall, but it also has a powerful incentive to publicly maintain a position of neutrality to the greatest possible degree, and to conceal in its own national interests the particular forms of aid that it might be providing to Iran. Is that also your assessment, Carl?
Yes, this is actually the same position China adopted towards the Ukraine conflict. China has publicly said we're not encouraging either side. We're not supplying weapons to either side of the conflict. But at the same time, if you look at what U.S. is complaining about is China supplying the so-called dual-use items, which semiconductors, drone engine parts, drone components. Those things China is supplying Russia, but it's for China. There's a plausible deniability say we're not supplying weapons to Russia, which is not supplying finished weapons to Russia. Same way China is not supplying finished weapon to Iran. Instead, China supply Iran with chemical precursors that Iran needs to manufacture its missiles, which is the main Iranian arsenal against U.S.-Israel attack. So my read is the same as yours. China is playing a balancing game to allow it to maintain as much a neutrality stance, but at the same time still help its allies like Iran and right. Russia. Yeah,
right. And there's been a lot of speculation in the media, both corporate and alternative media, about what exactly China is providing to Iran by way of assistance. And so, for example, we saw a report recently, I think this was in the corporate press in the United States, based on intelligence sources, that China is providing weaponry, finished weaponry, but it's going through third countries. It's not being delivered directly. So that kind of thing. What I'm interested in knowing, Carl, is let's just talk about hard facts, what we know with reasonably reliable objective evidence. What can you say with confidence? You mentioned a couple of things, chemical precursors. What can you say with confidence based upon the hard facts, hard evidence that China is providing to Iran at this particular time?
China is probably providing satellite intelligence to Iran, including satellite targeting. Iran has gotten very good in this round, even compared to the 12 Days War last year. They know where to hit, what to hit. Even the U.S. personnel in hiding out in hotels in UAE, and they. Obviously, Iran has very good human intelligence on the ground. There's no denying it. But I think Iran also got plenty of help for access to the satellite intelligence. This is why recently U.S. is putting another sanction on a Chinese satellite map provider company for that specifically claim that China is providing the satellite intelligence to Iran.
Right. Let's talk about another country in the region and its relations with China, and that is Israel. On the one hand, China's government has been quite critical of Israel's heinous atrocities against the Palestinian people, its rampant violations of international law. It has been one of the more outspoken governments in the world, actually, when it comes to defending the rights of Palestinians. But it does maintain significant economic relations with Israel. At least the most recent data that I saw suggested that it is, if not the largest trading partner, one of the one or two largest trading partners of Israel. What do you think China's calculus is there? If the government recognizes, and clearly it does, that Israel is just flagrantly violating international law with respect to Palestinians. Why do you think it continues to maintain economic relations with Israel?
Well, I can provide a historical perspective of Chinese relationship with Israel. For the most of for the decades all the way up to 1990, China did not recognize Israel. I remember this. I lived in China in 1980s. At that time, Israelis cannot travel to China with an Israeli passport. They will have to use some other passport to get to China because China didn't recognize Israel, and China was one of the first to recognize a Palestinian state in 1988. They had a Palestinian embassy in Beijing back then. And I remember Yasser Arafat regularly visited China all the way through the 1980s. There was a big shift in 1990 for many reasons. One is China faced international isolation following the Tiananmen Square protests. And so China trying to break out of its diplomatic isolation. At the same time, there was a negotiated peace settlement between the PLO and the Israelis that led to the Oslo Accord in, I think it was 1992. And so following that, China established relationship with Israel. Because at that time also the reason is China can be more pro-Palestinian than Palestinians. At that time, it looks like Oslo Accord was going to stick. Before everything that happened next, and then in the early 1990s, there was so after 1989 Tiananmen Square incident, China was under international arms embargo from most of the Western countries. And Israel, after China established relationship with Israel in the early 1990s, Israel became a vector for China to get access to Western military technology because Israeli didn't care. They just want, you pay them, they will sell it to you. And that's how there was famously Israeli, they were trying to develop their own indigenous fighter project based on F-16. This was a lobby fighter project, but there was a pressure from the United States for Israel to cancel it. So Israel decided, okay, we'll just sell the designs to the Chinese, and that supposedly gave China a lot of a leg up in developing their own indigenous J-10 fighter program. So there was that cooperation, but around 2000. Early 2000 and up to 2010, this is when the United States really stepped in and tell Israel, you have to stop that. You there's no, we don't want you to serve as a backdoor to funnel our technology, military technology to China. So by 2010s, that conduit has basically stopped. So from the period of 1990 to 2010s, Israel was one of the backdoor channel for China to access Western, but particularly American technology. After 2010, though, that this is the part where, because this is when China was pushing for its Belt and Road Initiative, and this is how China got into the development of Haifa port. But as I understand, the new Haifa port is actually been taken over by an Indian conglomerate. There might be a difference between different terminals, but my understanding the new Haifa port is under Indian management. But China is economically involved with Israel because just as a lot of countries in the world, their largest trading partner is with China. Israel was no exception. Now, why China did not place sanction on Israel? Your guess is as good as mine. My guess is China did not want to openly antagonize Israel's biggest sponsor, which is United States, because for up to very recently, China is trying to adopt a conciliatory stance toward the U.S. It's trying to avoid conflict. Xi Jinping actually brought up the Thucydides traps again during the meeting with Trump. He said, we don't have to fall into the trap. We do not have to fall into this conflict. So they rightfully see that Israel do have a lot of influence in the United States, and by placing open sanction on Israel would lead to even worsening ties with the United States. I mean, the ties with the United States is already pretty bad. That's my guess. My guess is just they want to avoid a more open confrontation with the United States on that front.
So, Carl, this past week, I managed to gain access to a conference in Athens that was designed to promote deeper ties between Israel, Greece, and Cyprus. And there were some senior government officials from both the Greek and Israeli governments there, a number of heavy hitters from the private sector, including the chairman of Israel Shipyards and the chairman of Israel Ports Authorities. And the overarching preoccupation of everybody who spoke at this conference was something called IMEC, which is the India, Middle East, Europe corridor.
Yes.
Now, I have to confess my ignorance. I had heard of this thing before, but I really didn't care much about it. And then when I was nor had I taken the time to investigate it. But these people seemed so obsessed with this project that I began to take a much closer look at it. One of the things I found in the course of my research was an article on the Atlantic Council, which presented this thing as an alternative to the Belt and Road Initiative. And what I also discovered was that this thing is, in my opinion, at this stage, largely a pipe dream, if I can put it that way, in part because, not only for this reason, but in part because it's supposed to pass through the Strait of Hormuz, and now that is now under the control of Iran. So what is your view about the IMEC? How real is this thing? What do you think China's view about it is? How is this going to affect, if at all, the Belt and Road Initiative?
The IMEC was seriously floated around during the Biden administration. And as you pointed out, it has always been touted as an alternative to the Belt and Road Initiative because the United States felt it has to counter the Chinese influence in the region. And the idea is to have this corridor that link India through the GCC countries, have a real connection that will traverse the GCC country, connect to Israel, and from Israel, ports, Haifa ports to Europe. Now, first of all, it's kind of, the whole idea is kind of economically dubious because, why you have to go unload your ships, go through Strait of Hormuz, unload your ships, put it on train, and then do another unloading at Haifa port and then ship when you can just have your ship sail to Red Sea. But I guess one rationale motivation provided was because the Houthis were shutting down the Red Sea traffic at that point, so that maybe that was made it gain some currency. But
actually, they launched it. I'm sorry to interrupt you. They launched it in September 2023, which was before the Ansar Allah, before the genocide began in Ansar Allah. So apparently, they thought back then that it made economic sense. But sorry to interrupt. Please continue.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, give me a normal situation. If there's no war, I mean, it doesn't really make too much sense. But they thought, I think it does a couple of things. One, it appeared the Biden administration is doing something, and to counter the Chinese influence. And two, it's to further bind the GCC countries to Israel. I mean, that's the whole Abraham Accords is all about. It's to first get the GCC country to recognize, normalize ties with Israel, and then get other majority Muslim countries, including Indonesia, to recognize Israel, basically to quash the whole Palestinian self-determination. And I think that's actually why one of the reasons why October 7th have to happen, because it happened the way after the aftermath of October 7th, basically the whole Abraham Accord expansion project was kaput. No Arab street would allow their rulers to formalize such a deal with Israel anymore.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
but
Indeed,
IMEC is
there was
very
a poll
much
done in Saudi Arabia.
entwined with that. Yeah, was very much entwined with that project. And because that will bind, again, GCC countries and Israel, align their interests together. But yeah, I agree with you that under the current situations, I mean, come on, it's a non sequitur.
Yeah, this doesn't stop the Greek government from investing enormous time and energy in this pipe dream. But hey, what can I say about that?
My guess is also, no, I mean, you probably know more, but my guess is also they thought this might be a way to curry favor with the United States, and I think there is some gas field, right? There's some gas field in the Eastern Mediterranean that Israel want to have a share, and I guess it falls between Israel and Cyprus. I mean, maybe that's part of it. I don't know.
Yeah, it is. I'm sure that's true. So let's switch to a region of the world closer to China. I want to talk to you about Trump's recent visit to China and Taiwan. Again, we saw reports that, Trump is I'm trying to find the right words to describe it here, but that he made conciliatory noises vis-a-vis Taiwan, tried to sort of reassure the Chinese government that the United States isn't going to make trouble in that part of the world. Do you think that there has been a shift, a real shift, and one that will endure in the U.S. government's approach to the Taiwan issue?
Well, I don't think they will stop selling weapons to Taiwan, because that's one of the core interests to the U.S. military-industrial complex. I mean, selling weapons to Taiwan is not even about defending Taiwan like they ostensibly claim, because what actually happened in practice is Taiwan usually pay upfront. They pay billions of dollars, and then they take delivery like 20 years later. And this is due to the state of military-industrial complex in the United States. The capacity is simply not there. And so everybody in Taiwan know, all these weapon purchases kind of paying protection money to get on the good side of the U.S. government, so they will take sides with Taiwan. And they don't expect those weapon platforms to do anything. If anything, they expect America, by purchasing this weapon, maybe United States will agree to intervene directly militarily. But at this point, I think there's very unlikely scenario, given what happened in the Strait of Hormuz. If the United States cannot take on Iran, forget about taking on China on the Taiwan Strait, because China has magnitude more missiles and more advanced missiles than Iran, and just look at how those 11 U.S. military bases got rendered uninhabitable in the Gulf region. That will be the same fate of all the U.S. bases in Japan, South Korea, the Philippines, if the shit hits the fan. So I think that Trump has been very conciliatory on this trip. He has been on his best behavior. I think one thing that compelled him to do so is the realization that they no longer hold the upper hands when you come to negotiation with China. And compared to what Trump said about Taiwan versus Biden, is actually a big difference, because there was Biden went to meet with Xi Jinping, and then right around that time when was interviewed on American TV, he was asked if the United States would come to defend Taiwan against the Chinese attack, and he said yes. And then you just see like Tony Blinken just go because like he just like blow apart this decade-long American strategic ambiguity on Taiwan. and the White House staff had to walk back Biden's statements, like, okay, he didn't understand the question, he's just denial old man, and so Trump has been very carefully avoiding the whole that same line of question. There was a time when he was asked specifically if he brought out the issue of Taiwan was in the talk with Xi Jinping. He just pretended he didn't hear it and moved on. And so I think the most important result of this meeting is probably there will be somewhat stability in the China-American relationship in the immediate future. I think both sides have recognized they need to put a floor on the free fall of the bilateral relationship so far, especially in the aftermath of the tariff war earlier, and besides, the United States is quite busy involved in this misadventure in West Asia. You cannot afford to antagonize China at this particular point. So I think we can look forward possibility of a more stabilized Sino-American relationship in the immediate future, because look, we're dealing with the Trump administration here, so who knows when he's going to change his mind, right? But maybe in the next month we'll be okay.
Yeah, it's like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to find inside. So, in any case, as Forrest Gump said, I want to talk to you about an interesting meeting that the leader of the Taiwanese opposition had. I believe it was in China just a few days before Trump arrived there. And her name is Chen Li-wen, and she is the chair of the Kuomintang or KMT party. And she said, interesting comment, her party didn't want Taiwan to become the next Ukraine. And she talked about peaceful and cooperative coexistence with both the government in mainland China and with Washington. Could you talk to us about the politics on the island of Taiwan, and how do you see the politics unfolding in the years ahead? How strong is the sentiment for, let's say, détente with the government in mainland China, and even with an unambiguous reunification of the two political systems?
Yeah, I mean, there is a tectonic plate shift in the Taiwan politics. For years, the political scene has kind of drifted leaning toward separation from mainland China. But given what they have witnessed in the Ukraine war, there are saner heads that has starting to prevail. Chen Li-wen made a very sensible comments, like, if you really love Taiwan, you do not want Taiwan to be turned into a battlefield. We do not want to be the Ukraine in East Asia, which makes sense. And the Taiwan has, she's also from the party, the KMT or Kuomintang party, that sometimes in English translation translate into the Chinese Nationalist Party. So they are, by their origin, they weren't the pro-independence party, versus the current ruling party of Taiwan, the DPP, the Democratic Progressive Party, which in its party platform says it advocates Taiwan independence. But then when they got elected into power, they try to whistle out of it. They say, well, okay, the Republic of China on Taiwan is already independent, so we don't have to declare independence anymore, which just means status quo. And so essentially both parties, they're both status quo parties, but there are some minor differences. The DPP, they do play on kind of divide and conquer strategy, especially along ethnic lines, because Taiwan's population, 85% of the Taiwan's population are descended from the family who were already living in Taiwan before 1949. And then 50% of the Taiwan population are the descendants of those people who came from mainland China as a result of the Chinese Civil War, when KMT or Chinese Nationalist Party was defeated by the communists. And and the KMT, when they first came to Taiwan, they rule under a military dictatorship from 1940, basically from the 1940s to 1987. 1987 is when martial law finally ended on Taiwan. And so that created a lot of bad memories among the local population that feel all these carpetbaggers from mainland China came over and then lorded themselves over the locals. And DPP kind of weaponized that historical memory and made it versus a local versus the mainlanders, and by extension also mainland China, where all these mainlanders come from. And so that is kind of the difference between the two parties. The KMT, they are kind of seen as a mainlander party, so they can't really position themselves as a openly Taiwan independence party. But now what's interesting is Taiwan is no longer a two-party place, because now there's a third party that emerged. And in fact, it's because of the emergence of the third party that split the vote of the opposition that allowed the current Taiwan leader to win, Lai Ching-te, to win presidency with only 40% of the vote. Even 60% of the electorate voted for other parties, but because it was split between other two opposition parties that still allowed DPP to rule. So now the interesting to watch is the coming election, municipal election in this year, 2026, and then following that will be their presidential election in 2028. So KMT has a very good chance to win. It's their election to lose, because the DPP party has been in power for over a decade. People are getting sick and tired of them because they haven't really done anything to improve the economic prospect, especially of the young people. Because Taiwan is facing the same problem of a lot of advanced economies in the West. Like the housing prices are high. The young people, that can't afford a place to live, and they don't have a good job prospect in the job market. They don't have they can't look forward to a better economic future. So there's stagnation. There's hollowing out. The only thing that Taiwan has right now is TSMC, the Taiwan semiconductor industry, and which United States is actively sabotaging, because they made TSMC to move production to Arizona and make them do tech transfer with Intel, which is not great for Taiwan. And Trump also commented on this. He said, Taiwan, they stole our technology. They stole our semiconductor industry. I don't know. I didn't like that. But that is the main pillar of the Taiwan economy right now. And that is being under pressure by Trump's policies, and also because the Taiwan economy depends so much on TSMC. It's also depend on heavily right now on the ongoing AI bubble, because NVIDIA, all their AI chips, and Apple, all their chips are getting made in Taiwan. And if the AI bubble bursts, this is going to be bad. Not only be bad for United States, because it will be terrible for Taiwan, because they have been cut off from one of their biggest market, which is China. This was under Trump's semiconductor sanction against China. TSMC was no longer allowed to make chips for mainland companies like Huawei, etc. So now they're depending on exclusively on the AI boom, or I call AI bubble, which is not sustainable.
It's just mind blowing that the United States would be able to block TSMC from selling chips to China. I mean, it's just crazy.
But this is how the U.S. Sanction work, because U.S. secondary sanction is essentially a global sanction. It says any companies that use any U.S. technology, or if you use U.S. dollar as transaction, then you are liable to our sanction laws. Then we can sanction you, and that's why you have to follow our rule. That's why when the U.S. put sanction on 5 Chinese oil refineries for buying Iranian oil, China had to issue a counterblock measure to tell the Chinese companies, hey, whoa, you don't need to apply, you don't need to obey the American laws. But normally, if the Chinese government didn't step in, it means that even the Chinese companies will try to refrain from doing business with those Chinese refiners, because they either have some overseas operation that dealing in the U.S. dollars, or they have some business in United States that they might be worried about, that make them a U.S. law that require a Chinese company in China to boycott a Chinese oil refinery. I mean, which is ridiculous. That's why Chinese government finally stepped in. It's like, whoa, we don't buy that shit here. Like, you guys are you guys are specifically ordered not to obey those U.S. sanctions. You better continue to do business with those Chinese refineries, or else we will get them. We will get you. Yeah.
This effectively forces a decoupling of the economies, does it not? To the extent that there is conflicting legislation, these corporations then have to choose in which jurisdiction they're going to operate. They can't choose both.
Yeah.
Do you think this is the start of some, or maybe it's not the start, maybe we're well into the process of decoupling of the Chinese and American economies because of the aggressive extraterritorial application of U.S. law by both the democratic regimes and the Republican regimes?
Well, I think the decoupling is going to be very difficult. This is why during the Trump meeting to China, he brought all the American oligarchs, from Apple to Nvidia, Elon Musk, Micron, Boeing, GE, Cargill, BlackRock, Blackstone, Goldman Sachs, who is who of the American oligarchs all went into China because they recognize decoupling from China is unrealistic. Even the U.S. military-industrial complex cannot decouple from China because the Raytheon CEO said, now we still need parts and components from China. One of the asks of the Trump administration, which I don't think they got, was actually for China to lift their export control on the rare earth to the American military-industrial complex. So currently, the China is still selling rare earth, but only to civilian industries like the car makers, because you need rare earth to make the magnets for the cars. But the Chinese exporters are not allowed to export to like Raytheon or which make Boeing kind of interesting. Like, it's Boeing get to have the rare earth. But anyway, so it's up to the Chinese regulatory agency to figure that out. But what Trump wanted to is a general lift of the export control on Chinese rare earth. We did not hear any announcement to that effect, so I assume that just didn't happen. And this is one of the way that people. This is how China conduct its business. It sells chemical precursors to Iran to allow Iran to make its missiles, but you will not sell rare earth to Raytheon or Lockheed Martin to allow them to output, make more F-35s and Patriot missiles. So this is how China plays game.
So finally, Carl, today President Vladimir Putin is traveling to China for a 2-day summit. Just broadly speaking, what do you think they aim to accomplish, the Chinese and Russian governments, in this important visit?
Well, it's interesting the timing of it, right? You have the Iranian prime minister and and Vladimir Putin basically sandwiched Trump in between. So I think there's a degree of coordination between Iran, Russia, and China on how they can collectively deal with the United States. And they probably also inform each other, like how, so there will be no surprises, on like whatever announcement that Trump administration is going to say, because Trump is, now I just saw a Financial Times article claiming that that Xi Jinping reportedly said that Putin will regret about the Ukraine war to Trump, which I not really. This is bogus. I mean, like the timing of this article at the same time when Putin is traveling to China. I mean, come on. I just don't buy that.
Let me guess. It was based on two unnamed officials from the United States. Just a wild guess. Sorry, Carl. you were saying.
Yeah. I mean, but you know how it goes. It's the same format. But so the Russia-China tie obviously has always been very important, but now it's been made more important in light of what happened in the Strait of Hormuz. Russia is China is probably going to increase its energy imports from Russia, both oil and gas, and just to make up for the reduced inflow from the Persian Gulf. And this is another thing that Trump supposedly said, that China made a commitment to buy American oil, which I guess that's possible because oil is a globally traded commodity. If China is unable to get oil from Persian Gulf, it will buy oil from elsewhere. What it does, though, is just going to raise the oil price globally because even though a lot of people say, okay, because United States has plenty of oil and gas, U.S. will benefit from the current blockade on the Strait of Hormuz. Well, some people will benefit. The U.S. big oil majors will benefit. Shell, the company Shell, they just released their quarterly earning reports for the first quarter of 2026. They doubled their profit compared to the last quarter. And that's from January, February to March. So only March was when the war really got under the way. So their next quarter earning report is going to be even more spectacular. But this is bad news for everybody else who buy their product because everybody else is paying for it. This is why you have reports of 45% of American farmers are declaring 45% increase in the farm bankruptcy in the United States, and 70% of American farmers said they can no longer afford the increase in the chemical fertilizers price and the diesel, and the increase in the price diesel. Because I say, these companies, they will export their expensive American LNG elsewhere to make the profit, maybe to Europe. So the American farmers still not going to get their fertilizers and diesel to plant their crops, which it's going to be really bad for end of the year when because the planting season is almost over now. The spring planting season is almost over, and that means 1 year we're going to have crop shortages. We're going to have grain shortages at the end of the year.
Yeah, we're in for a hell of a summer. And a fall. Anyways, Carl, it's been a great pleasure talking to you. Fascinating discussion. Thank you for your insights, and I hope we can have you back on the program soon to continue the conversation.
For sure. Thank you.
And we're signing off today on May 19th, 2026.